faculty, they will progress spiritually more swiftly and sanely than has ever been known. Aleister Crowley knew that if he was to establish a new age of Antichrist, he would have to destroy God's design for family, consisting of men and women as husband and wife. Crowley therefore declared in his book Magic Without Tears that family was public enemy number one. Crowley, who was out to destroy the family, said this, quote, "Think what horrid images it evokes from the mind. Not only Victorian, wherever the family has been strong, it has always been an engine of tyranny. Curse them. They are always in the way. To the performance of this work, speaking of the New Age, the nearest obstacle and the most obvious is the family. Since the satanic revolution of the 1960s, there's been an incredible attack on the family as homosexual recruiting has increased dramatically. Crowley made it no secret that he was interested in popularizing homosexual deviancy and even child molestation. Crowley declared, 'Let me seduce the boys of England. I shall fight openly for that which no living Englishman dare defend, even in secret, sodomy. And in truth, there seems no better way to avoid a contamination of women. Sodomy is an aristocratic virtue which our middle class had better imitate if they wish to be smart.'" Crowley's emphasis on homosexuality found their way into mainstream politics, initially through homosexual organizer Harry Hay. Crowley's teaching of sexual perversion also included sadomasochism and all kinds of sexual deviancy, including copulation with a goat, which ended in slitting the goat's throat and then drinking its blood. Part of Aleister Crowley's so-called sex magic included orgies with little boys whom Crowley molested. Crowley taught that in order for the new eon of Antichrist to be established, he had to initiate the world into homosexuality. Crowley began by implementing many of his homosexual sex magic rituals into his secret order called the OTO. Former Playboy editor Robert Anton Wilson stated, quote, "It is a synthesis of Eastern and Western occult traditions with modern scientific method that is probably Crowley's major achievement." Crowley's teachings included yoga of all form. In 1969, the London Times declared Aleister Crowley as one of the, quote, "makers of the 20th century." British journalist Gavin Baddeley, who was a member of the Church of Satan, said that it is, quote, "easy to see how a Crowley might interpret the age of Aquarius as the eon of Horus, predicted by Crowley. A lot of people were doing what they wilt." He went on to say the free love and wanton drug abuse so central to Crowley were now common practice among many young people. Anger happily announced Crowley's dictum that the key to joy is disobedience, and declared not only was the eon of Horus upon us, but the eon was Lucifer. Kenneth Anger, the co-founder of the Church of Satan, said, quote, "Christianity has had its day." Crowley said it would be replaced by the eon of Horus, who is the crowned and conquering child.
The great beast died in 1947, and for a decade it seemed all his ideas had died with him. But then his do-what-thou-wilt philosophy found a new home with a generation that was experimenting with free love, drugs, and alternative beliefs. Crowley had the same boundaries 40 years earlier. He was now a 60s icon. John Lennon acknowledged him as a personal hero by putting him on the front cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. Drugs guru Timothy Leary went tripping in Crowley's footsteps.
It's a great trip.
And the Rolling Stones were drawn to him by the underground filmmaker Kenneth Anger.
Crowley had hoped to get his disciples into influential positions in America to influence the masses. One such disciple was former Harvard professor turned drug guru Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary, the defunct Harvard professor, led the drug revolution in the 1960s as he handed out mescaline and LSD like it was candy to the youth. This in turn opened up the hippie youth of the West to the pagan demonic gods of the East, who were also promoted by Aleister Crowley. We can see here that Timothy Leary is under a painting which bears the number of the Antichrist, 666, who is prophesied to rule the world until he's destroyed by Christ at Armageddon. Timothy Leary claimed that he came to the realization that he was to usher in Crowley's new age when he was using Crowley's tarot cards. Leary asked the question, "Who am I and what is my destiny?" Leary claims that he then cut to the Ace of Disc. Robert Anton Wilson declared, "This shows a large disc bearing the Greek letters to Megatherion, the great beast." Leary interpreted this to mean that he is Crowley reborn and is supposed to complete the work Crowley began. On a PBS interview, Timothy Leary let his hair down and admitted that he was carrying on Satanist Aleister Crowley's work and that the 1960s is when the plan began to come to fruition.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. You know, Crowley said he was in favor of finding your own self and do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law under love. It was a very powerful statement. I'm sorry he isn't around now to appreciate the glories that he started.
As Satan guided Crowley, Crowley declared that his writings were to be, quote, circulated among the young, end quote. Crowley predicted that America would pick up, quote, a few axioms on which a working majority can agree, a few dogmas which it could rally. Do what thou wilt, of course, became do your own thing, and if it feels good, do it in the 1960s. Timothy Leary came up with a few of his own.
He looked out at that crowd and he said, turn on, tune in,
That's right.
and drop out.
Turn on, tune in, and drop out.
We're turned on, and we're tuned in, and we're very dropped out.
Turn on, tune in, and drop out.
Turn on, tune in, and drop out became turn on, tune in, and take over, as the easily led Crowleyan youth culture was deceived into believing that they had received spiritual enlightenment, when in fact they had swung the door open to Satan and his plan to destroy the world. Satan had effectively slipped in his destructive teachings to undermine traditional moral values through the cloak of a supposed anti-materialistic peace movement. Crowley taught that his satanic doctrine should be cloaked under the lie of love, and he believed the youth would fall for it. If Timothy Leary was Crowley's drug guru of the 1960s, Leary dubbed John Lennon and the Beatles as the four evangelists. The Beatles wrote the song Come Together as a campaign song for Leary's hopeful presidential bid that, thank God, never got off the ground. Crowley taught that he was to be the leader of a youth army and ended up finding himself on the front cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album.
It was 20 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play.
The song states that it was 20 years ago today that Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play. The album came out in 1967. Crowley had died 20 years earlier in 1947, the year Leary claimed he passed on the baton to him to bring him the Satanic Revolution. This made Sgt. Pepper a likely reference to Aleister Crowley, the father of the new eon. John Lennon summed up the entire Beatle philosophy before his death by quoting Satanist Aleister Crowley. Lennon stated, "The whole Beatle idea was to do what you want, right? Do what thou wilt." Sgt. Pepper's has been considered the greatest concept album in the history of music. In a few moments, we'll see what this concept was really all about.
In what may be one of the most telling private conversations in modern history, Leary recalled the first time he took psilocybin with Aldous Huxley. Huxley's eyes were closed, he said. Suddenly, he clapped his hands. "Your role is quite simple," Huxley told Leary. "Become a cheerleader for evolution. That's what I did and my grandfather before me. These brain drugs will bring about vast changes in society. We must spread the word." Huxley then continued with a chilling addendum. "The obstacle to this evolution, Timothy, is the Bible." Leary, like Huxley, spent his life as a cheerleader for evolution, tearing down the foundations of Christendom and erecting in its place a syncretistic blend of Eastern religion, shamanism, and a do-it-yourself, drug-fueled enlightenment.
Our Father, who art in cellular heaven within, hallowed be thy name, from whose loins we have sprung.
And a primary tool for advancing this New Age gospel? You got it, rock and roll.
Ironically, it was a Crowleyan influence, Alfred Kinsey and Harry Hay, who conditioned the world to receive the sexual revolution of the 60s. Because Harry Hay, who led the charge of the sodomy revolution of the 60s, was, like Leary, a disciple of Aleister Crowley's teachings. In fact, the Harry Hay biography you see before you declares, quote, "Harry played the organ for the Los Angeles Lodge, or OTO, Aleister Crowley's notorious anti-Christian spiritual group, a secret society known to have created homosexual sex magic rituals." This is so significant because Hay is considered, quote, "the founder of the modern gay movement." In fact, Harry Hay's book, Radically Gay, states, quote, Hay refers to gay men's sexuality as, quote, "our gateway to spirit." Beginning in 1991, he has held yearly sex magic workshops to explore these potentials with other gay men. This book is declared to be, quote, "gay liberation" in the words of its founder. In fact, on page 241 of his book, Radically Gay, Hay quotes Satanist Aleister Crowley's book, The Book of the Law. He states, quote, "Come forth, O children, under the stars, and take your fill of love."
And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burn in their lusts one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which